At this time, I would like to turn today's program over to Darren. Darren, you may now begin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm excited to have my partner in crime, Ron Lunassen, with me, who has really been the lead in product management for Informatica Cloud and has been with Informatica since the early days. So I do want to remind you all, if you're watching today live, you can use the chat panels, and we will be sending out the recording and presentation after the event. So let's go into today's agenda. We've really been focusing on, over the last year in particular, on talking to longtime Informatica PowerCenter customers about how they can really take advantage of Informatica Cloud and all of the innovation we've delivered with our multi-tenant service, extend what they're already doing with our core technology, our core platform. That's really the topic of today. So many who have joined are longtime Informatica customers, partners. You may not be as familiar with Informatica Cloud and what we've been doing in this area. So we want to spend a little bit of time providing you with an introduction, and then we're going to dive into 5 specific use cases and spend today with Ron going through some demonstrations. So let's dive right in. Now, seeing it's kind of an interesting journey, and I think all of you are probably going through this at various degrees in your organizations. Many companies are going to be slow to move right to the cloud. It's a moving turn. The pace of innovation isn't exactly cutting edge or bleeding edge. And of course, there are a lot of companies. If you and I were to start a company today, we would probably be all in on cloud and would really be on the bleeding edge of adoption. But majority, what we're seeing is it's really in the middle, where it's this fact that you have a mix of on-premise systems, legacy systems with these new software as a service applications and platforms that are coming to the enterprise. And we're really going to be talking today about the organizations that are in the middle, that be sort of like one of these high-speed jets in some areas, but they also have a lot of legacy systems that they need to rationalize and come to terms with and make sure that they are well integrated with new modern platforms. So we see hybrid IT as the new normal. You will have to figure out as you move to this new model, whether it's software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service, how to ensure that you're not delivering more silos into the enterprise, more data fragmentation. It's really critical. What we've seen is that if you really develop an integration strategy early and think it through, you're going to see much greater return on investment with all your cloud investments, as well as greater adoption of these applications and platforms. So to the new era of hybrid IT. Now, what's really changing here is the pace of innovation. And this quote came to us from one of our customers on the business side, who really, I think, says it all. With Salesforce, you can have a field in a minute. Now, on the other hand, if you can't get anything to put into that field for 6 months while you're willing to go through your IT process, this will really help you. If you can't respond to the data with the same amount of agility, it's essentially useless. So what we want to talk about is how you can take advantages of Informatica Cloud and the innovation that we've put into our multi-tenant service and extend the core value proposition of Informatica, that making sure you can deliver timely, relevant, and trustworthy information across all of your systems. So integration is really needed more than ever. And I think the key word from the previous slide is also agility. It's not going to be good enough to tell the business who is moving aggressively towards new cloud applications that it's going to take 6 weeks or 6 months to get to their requirements. Just aren't going to be satisfied with that pace. So we really need to think about how do you integrate quickly and with major new infrastructure investments, how to integrate all these new applications that are coming in either through the departments and divisions or through centralized purchasing strategies, and how do you make sure that these cloud integration solutions that you do choose are not only acceptable today, but they're going to scale and be able to handle your increasing volumes and complexity over time. A lot of people in the era of big data, people talk about the 3 V's, volume, variety, and validity. Those 3 V's are equally true when it comes to SaaS application adoption in the enterprise. And you can see this stat from IDC. Over the next few years, SaaS spending is going to grow by over 100%. So as one CIO said to me not too long ago, this cloud train, you either can get on it or get run over by it. And what we're seeing is a huge shift where IT is truly becoming cloud first and seeking ways to align with the business. And that's what we're going to spend time on today, how Informatica Cloud can really enable this IT business alignment collaboration. So let's just a minute to review Informatica Cloud with you so you understand what it is and how it works. And then I'm sure you'll have some questions, and watching us with us live today, you can jump into the chat panels and we'll get to your questions. Informatica back in 2006, we had a pretty aggressive strategy around the cloud. We talked building cloud connectors. We talked about building really cloud-based services or applications that you're going to see today to deliver self-service and make sure that integration can be handled by people who aren't necessarily long-time integration specialists, but also make sure we have enough power for those people who do need more advanced requirements. And evolving to a cloud integration platform. Ron will talk about what that means and how our overall roadmap is really focusing on what Gartner now increasingly is talking about as integration platform as a service, or IaaS. On this chart that our data volumes have grown. So if you're interested in actually tracking this, you go to trust.informaticacloud.com, and you can see we recently hit a milestone where we processed over 2 billion transactions in a day. So we're doing pretty heavy lifting through our cloud service. So have you just take us through the architecture of Informatica Cloud, and then we'll dive into the 5 ways that PowerCenter customers can take advantage of our cloud service.
Sounds good. Again, folks, just quick introduction on my side. Ron Lawson. I've been with Informatica since 1995, so I know a lot of old PowerCenter folks on this call. I was around when it was PowerMart and was a product manager for PowerCenter 7. So feel free, if you've got questions about anything that we're going to show, as Darren has been mentioning, just to chat in the QA panels, and feel free to ask whatever questions you have. Typically, this slide right here is usually the first slide that we really start to get some questions, so please be shy and ask anything that you need answering. All right. From an architecture standpoint, the way that Informatica Cloud works, and I'll step through this in slide, and of course I'll be going through a lot of demos as well. But to start off using Informatica Cloud, you bring up your standard web browser, go to Informatica Cloud, and sign up for an account. Once that's done, we're then going to be able to, or what we'll then be prompted to do, is to download something that we call our secure agent. Now, that secure agent is going to be downloaded one time. It's self-updating, self-upgrading. So once you've done that download, you don't have to worry about it ever again. And at its core, that secure agent is actually the runtime engine of PowerCenter. And there's a lot of implications, a lot of benefits of having that, and I'll go through that through my examples throughout this call. Download that secure agent or that runtime engine. As you define and design your mappings, when it actually comes down to runtime, one is Informatica Cloud will send to the secure agent actually the runtime instructions on what it needs to do, and then the secure agent, since it's been downloaded and is installed behind your firewall, can get direct access to your on-premise systems and applications that you have, and be able to connect to any of the cloud apps and perform integration that's required. And when we jump into the demo, it really is about simplicity, being able to get up and running very quickly, and as I mentioned, that secure agent, because it's still that PowerCenter runtime engine, it's a unified platform which allows us to do a lot of things with both Informatica PowerCenter, our on-premise products, and Informatica Cloud.
Questions coming in about, on the slide you have Informatica Cloud integrating with cloud applications like Salesforce and NetSuite. Can you also use Informatica Cloud to connect to non-cloud-based systems?
Absolutely. We're actually seeing quite a few of our customers that are using the Informatica Cloud and that secure agent that's downloaded behind the customer firewall to do on-premise to on-premise integration. One of the use cases that we're starting to see is people that want to allow people to have read access on the enterprise data warehouse, able to move that potentially to a staging area or to a small data mart. So all on-premise behind the firewall integration, but still being driven through Informatica Cloud through a simple, easy-to-use UI.
Okay, question. What is the footprint and resource requirement, CPU RAM, for the secure agent?
Very low. And the reason why I say that is, and you'll see this when I actually go into the details of what Informatica Cloud does. Out of the box, the types of mappings that we deal with don't necessarily get overly complex. And just apparently because we are using essentially PowerCenter 9.1 as our core engine, unless you're doing heavy amounts of lookups or aggregations or anything along those lines, the standard mappings that are generated require very little resources. So I think from a standpoint, we've actually seen people doing full trials over a 30-day period on laptops. So that's your standard hardware these days should be able to accommodate Informatica Cloud.
Okay, so for premises integration and even cloud integration, no data leaves the premises into the cloud.
And that's a very good question, and one point I definitely want to emphasize. The way the arrows are drawn here are done for a reason between what's dotted line and what's a solid line. When it comes down to runtime, when it's actually moving your business data, the secure agent will connect directly to the on-premise data sources, and have any cloud applications, it'll connect directly to those. It does not pass data through Informatica Cloud and our data center and onto your cloud apps. That line is only there for metadata. For doing things like when you're designing your mappings and the metadata instructions on how to run a mapping, that's what gets passed between arrows 1 and 2. Business data only goes across those solid arrows.
Going. Good stuff. Good questions.
All right.
So we go through. I know we want to kind of get to you sharing your desktop. Let's just go to a high level of the five that we've seen in Informatica Cloud Extend PowerCenter. We've bucketed them into 5 key areas. One is the concept of self-service, and know that self-service for some of you can be a scary thought, especially when you think about people, touching production systems. So we actually have to talk about governed self-service, and you'll see what we mean by that in the demonstration. We're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about reuse, how with our templates you can build build workflows and then share them and actually make them available in the marketplace. Interoperability, the ability for mappings to be created in any environment, either in PowerCenter or in the cloud, and seamlessly move back and forth. We'll talk administration and provisioning. So I want to take us through this at a high level, Ron, and then dive into what this looks like within the product.
Sure. And before I jump into that, I just want to acknowledge the one question that's out there around Informatica repositories and Amazon clouds and clients on local servers. Please repost that question if it's not clear by the end of this webinar. I think you'll get a good feel on what approaches that we're taking that's slightly different than what you're doing today. So hold that and resend that if you need to. So the 5 use cases, let me drill into them each very briefly, and I'll actually go into the demos to explain each of them. The first part, and this is really where Informatica Cloud began, it was about coming up, as Darren talked about earlier, with a solution that is something that an integration person doesn't have to be there to drive, right? If it's a person that maybe is an administrator for a cloud application, or maybe it is an IT person, but they haven't been trained on PowerCenter, but understand the rules that are required to move data from an on-premise system to a cloud app or to an on-prem to an on-prem, we've come to something that still leverages the same Informatica PowerCenter engine, but is a much simpler interface. So people now have access to the power of Informatica PowerCenter through a simple web UI. And I'll do all the demos here, and we can see this in person in just a sec. The second piece is around this notion of integration templates. And one way to think about this is we have with Informatica Cloud services that we provide out of the box, and I'll show demos of those. But we'll be able to do, now that Informatica Cloud has expanded our platform capabilities, can actually go off and create your own integration applications that you can go off and publish to people in the organization, even if they don't have access to PowerCenter. So the big miss here is that you're going to be able to get more levels of reuse, even with people who don't have PowerCenter. So consistency around your transformations, more consistency with your data. And I'll give a couple of examples of that. The third piece is around how you can actually use Informatica Cloud with PowerCenter directly. And the notion here is that you can actually take jobs created inside Informatica Cloud and import that into PowerCenter, or go the other direction. If someone that is an integration specialist who was asked by someone on the business or one of these application teams to create a mapping for them, you design that in PowerCenter and then publish it to Informatica Cloud so that the cloud users have access to those mappings. The piece I'm going to show, and this is really what's starting to take off in our large enterprise customers that are using Informatica Cloud in a broad way, is the ability to have levels of self-service but still maintain levels of control. So very similar to a lot of the security functionality that we've been introducing in PowerCenter and bringing that into Informatica Cloud so that it isn't the wild, wild west. People have the ability to perform self-service, but can only do things that they're allowed to do. Lastly, within something that we call master and sub-orgs, you'll have the ability to create an competency center or a center of excellence built in Informatica Cloud. And that with a single login to the org or to the administrator org, you would be able to provision multiple orgs or accounts for Informatica Cloud for different projects, yet still have a single place that maintain control and visibility into all of those projects. Now to go ahead and take a look and see what all these things actually mean. So I'm going to share my desktop. All right. Be sure, Darren, can you see my
Maximize your window there.
Sure.
There we go.
All right, great. All right, so I'm in the Informatica Cloud website. This is a surprise to many people that we have our own website that has got cloud-specific information, and it's our place where you can sign up and take a trial, or log in if you already have an account. I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to sign up as my demo user. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to show is that main service that is most heavily used by our customers today, and the data synchronization capabilities. I think I'm going to have time today, but we have other services that perform things like contact and address validation. We have some data replication capabilities. The idea here is that you can help to archive some of your cloud solutions and replicate them to a local data store. We have some data quality and data profiling rules that are built into Informatica Cloud. We'll talk about some of these other folks here in just a second. Here in the data synchronization piece. All right, so being that this is my existing demo account, I've already taken the time to download and install my secure agent. So if you were starting from scratch, you would have had to do that first. But I've done that. And now I simply go to the new button. What pops up is a full 6-step wizard to perform real integration. And one of the neat things about this solution is that we've actually seen customers go from discovery of the service to signing up and actually performing data integration, including the download and setup of the secure agent in less than an hour. So somebody that was from the old on-premise and from the PowerCenter world, it was one of the things that really kind of blew my mind when we first got it started with this. All right, so I'll perform an upload. And this is a typical scenario that we see with Informatica Cloud, where maybe the application team or the administrator for, let's say, Salesforce.com needs to go off and grab some account data that's sitting in a database or behind the firewall, and they simply move that into Salesforce. So I'm going to perform that step. In step 2 of my wizard, I'm going to choose my source details. So in this, I'm simply going to choose my local SQL database. After that, I see all of the tables and views that I have access to. Take a quick look into the details of this connection. Here, because we've got the secure agent that's downloaded onto my machine, I'm simply specifying basically ODBC types of information to connect to that local database through that secure agent. We'll often create new connections if you're starting from scratch. Not only can we connect to all the common database systems and flat files that you would see when you're normal on-premise configuration, but one of the things that's something that we find really exciting is that we launched a connector toolkit on top of Informatica Cloud, which allows both ourselves and partners to create new connections to applications on-premise and cloud very quickly. So this is one of the things where if there's a new app that's out there, how to be able to connect to that. If you go to informaticacloud.com, go to the marketplace and take a look, and there's a good chance that we actually, with Informatica Cloud, can connect to some of those systems. All right, I've got a local SQL database. I'm pointing to account dim table as my source. And as earlier, I'm going to move this into my account object in Salesforce. So I'm just going to choose my demo Salesforce org or my Salesforce account. And here all of the standard and custom objects for this cloud application. And I'm just going to choose the account object. All right, so step data filter, this is an optional step, but you can go off and perform the kind of filters that you would expect. So if I only wanted to grab records created, this year or within the last 2 years, you can specify that. And we have an internal variable that we store for $last runtime. So if you had to do some basic change data capture using timestamps, you could do that through this mechanism. All right, so move on to step 5, the field mapping screen. For people used to PowerCenter and building mappings, this is our mapping screen. By default, anything that matches by name is automatically mapped. Now, if it doesn't match by name, let's say you've got the account name field that's out there, and it's account underscore name, so I can just simply drag and drop that over. I've got another field, let's say billing street is actually made up of address 1 and address 2. I can pull address 1 and address 2 both on top of billing street, and by default we're going to perform a concat. That's a hyperlink, so if I drill into that, familiar with PowerCenter, what you're basically seeing here is the expression transformation exposed in the cloud. So you've got all the same functions that you would see in PowerCenter, including things like your soul for decode and if, and you can nest these just like you do in PowerCenter. And then on that, we also have the ability to perform things like lookups. So you can look up against anything that you can connect to with Informatica Cloud, and you specify your lookup conditions and your return value. So again, very similar functionality as PowerCenter, provided in a much simpler way because we're dealing with simpler use cases here. This is really about dealing with some of these cloud integration cases where it's a simple translation of data from on-premise to cloud, or maybe you're just pulling some records out of the cloud to load it into a data store somewhere. This is very applicable for that.
So Ron, pause for a couple of questions. One question about the data transfer. Can it support synchronous services, like a request response type of service? And we'll take that and we'll come back to a couple architecture questions as well.
So with the connector toolkit, we can connect to endpoints that are either REST-based or web services-based. Salesforce, for example, is they have both a web services, SOAP-based web services and a REST-based API. And so behind the scenes, we're able to connect to both of those. And but from an end user standpoint, what you simply see is what looks like a relational source and target. So all the action around the mechanics for actually connecting to the source and targets is taken care of automatically with our connectors.
Okay, and community for an answer on the Unix question. So we support Linux and Windows. what's your answer to a Unix environment?
The answer right now is no, we don't support that yet. But if it is something that we're watching closely, if our community and our users do want us to support the flavors of Unix, it is something that we would consider. So we do have a idea site on our community page for Informatica Cloud. So this is something that's of importance to you. That's the forum to go off and kind of bump up that feature request, and that's something that we look at when we do our releases. And just to note, just like all good cloud services, we do go through anywhere from 3 to 4 upgrades per year. So that's one of the other nice things about being on the cloud team is that the way that we release is very different than we would on the on-premise side.
I posted a link to the ideas page in the chat panel. Another one is about mapping and variables. Can you comment about that?
Mapping variables isn't directly supported here, but when I get into some of the template discussion, again, if there's additional questions around that functionality or the use case, repost that question when I get to that section. It'll be more demos from now. Moving on to the last step here. So now can you go off and build your mappings? We actually have our workflow manager in step 6 where you can schedule and execute these tasks on a recurring basis. So here I run it on an existing schedule that I've created, or I can go off and create my own schedule. It's got all the base functionality that you would expect with a scheduler. I also specify different notification emails and who gets what based off failure, warning, and success. Pre- and post-processing commands are also supported. Go ahead and save and run this. And what you'll see is that you have the ability to monitor these tasks as running from the activity log that's presented within Informatica Cloud. And it's a web-based application. You can go off and access this from any computer that you have access to. Right? So it's a home computer, whether it's a smartphone, you have the ability to see the activity monitor. In fact, from a smartphone, we actually do have both an Android and an Apple app available. So there's a native application on both to monitor and see what's going on with Informatica Cloud. If this is a long-running job, you would see the increments and the counts. Because this is a pretty demo, what you see is simply this screen here. We've got the basic statistics around and how many rows loaded and failed and so forth. Right, so the next thing that I'd like to show is the share Informatica Cloud tasks with PowerCenter. I've got PowerCenter open here, and we've got my account load object that I just created. Now, see is I've also got a radio button or a button here to download the mapping XML. What I can do is we go off and click this button, downloading my XML file. Now to note, so what's the use case here? Right, so you've got some folks that are using Informatica Cloud for self-service, and say they think it's let's get started with something, but the requirements get more difficult over time. And say, hey, look, I started off with this. Can you please now, Mr. PowerCenter person, take ownership of these mappings that I've created? Nothing about this functionality, with that being able to download the mapping XMLs, is you can actually go off and take the XML file and import it directly into PowerCenter. We can then start running immediately. Right? So let's do that. So I'm going to go and log into the repository manager. Import that XML file that I just downloaded from Informatica Cloud. And make sure I have the right one. All right, 32 AM, so it's the bottom one. All right, go ahead and import this. Put it into my Informatica Cloud folder inside PowerCenter repository. All right, reports just like any other PowerCenter XML file. Go into the designer and mess this up. E is this. So you take run, and which is a PowerCenter mapping with the source qualifier, express my Salesforce target, and you see I've got the name being dragged to name all here in PowerCenter. So actually what gets run, that secure agent by that runtime PowerCenter engine, I'm actually running this mapping that was generated by Informatica Cloud. So we talked about that dotted line, that XML or metadata, the runtime instructions, it's actually a PowerCenter XML file telling the secure agent or runtime engine what to do. All right, let's talk about the next level of interoperability. Move data or mappings from Informatica Cloud into PowerCenter, I can go in direction. Right here is a project team that's out there. They're using Informatica Cloud for their integration needs. Maybe they're able to deal 9 out of 10 use cases with Informatica Cloud and the wizard-based UI that I showed you. But maybe a little bit more complex, they would like to be able to do their integrations, and it really can't be dealt with in that wizard, so they've asked you for help as the PowerCenter person. My example here, I'm going to open my data warehouse full PowerCenter, and he's got a mapping with source join, 3 different maplets, some lookups, and some custom expressions that I've got that are linking the account dim dimension table in my data warehouse. The Informatica Cloud user says, hey, I grab data, I have read access to the data warehouse. I make sure that this data is loaded into the data warehouse before I extract it and load it into Salesforce. Hey, Mr. PowerCenter person, can you please help me with this? How would I be able to tie these 2 processes together? What you can actually do is take this mapping. Let me go to my data warehouse folder back in the repository manager. I'm going to take custom node and export that to this or here. Right, so now if I into Informatica Cloud, go to the PowerCenter link here, applications, and if I knew what I'm now able to do, so my custom mode, I simply upload that XML file. All right, so if I go modes folder, and I've got my workflow XML. So I'm basically taking the job stored inside the Informatica Cloud repository, and now I can have the Informatica Cloud user actually leverage this particular mapping. They have some level of configuration. They can specify their connections to things like the sources and targets. The rest of the mapping is here. You can see it, so you can have an appreciation of what's in this mapping, but they can't really modify this. They can simply just take this mapping and run it. So save that. And they run this on their own schedule. They can run it independently, or they can leverage Informatica Cloud's task flow capability, which is like a workflow. You can chain multiple tasks together. So this is my customer nightly load. I can run this on a schedule, run it nightly, and I can say I want to run that center mapping first. After that's done, I'm going to go off and run the data synchronization task, something that was built through the wizard that I showed you earlier, and run afterwards. This is where something that was designed and built in PowerCenter can now be used inside of Informatica Cloud and tied together under the umbrella of this task flow. to run a logical unit. Right. I don't see the questions, Darren. Is there anything up there that I should answer before I move on to the next demo?
Lots of questions. Let me pick a couple here. One was about Netezza support. It's asked a couple of times. Might be a good one for the Diaz site, but what's your on that one?
So the fact that leverage the same engine, technically it's something that is possible to do from a QA and testing standpoint. Netezza has not been officially certified for use with Informatica Cloud yet. So this is something that if there's enough requirements or requests for it, it's something that we can put into the hopper here to get that officially supported.
Okay. When moving the XML from Cloud to PowerCenter, are the data sources created in PowerCenter if they weren't there before?
Yes. So if you move from Cloud to PowerCenter, any objects, sources, targets, expressions, if they don't exist, they'll be created. If they do exist, so if you do have already a folder with, let's say, all of your Salesforce objects already imported, it will prompt you, as normally would, to replace or rename. So you can go off and reuse, replace, rename, or reuse. So you'd be able to reuse existing objects if they existed.
Okay, great.
All right. So I showed the basic wizard. Let me go back to the PowerPoint here. So I showed the point and click. I showed PowerCenter interoperability. Let me spend a little bit of time talking about reusable integration templates. Now here is that as an PowerCenter integration person, you can start to define standards that can be used outside of Informatica. So for use of these reusable objects. All right, so let's start off with an example that seems to be resonating quite well. Up on the screen here. The example that I've got is I'm going to use something around date conversion. And so, again, anybody that's done integration for any amount of time has more than likely run into this scenario. Let's say you're dealing with a file that's created from one system, and it's stored date formats one way. But before I load it into my relational systems, I have to do a date conversion just so that I can simply put it in the format that can be easily consumed in this target system. Very do, not very hard to deal with, but it's very tedious, right? If one file has 5 date fields, it's 2 date conversions. If it has 100 date fields, you have to build the thing and manually create 100 2 date conversions. What I've got on the screen here is something that we call a template, and it looks like a PowerCenter mapping, but it's a parameterized mapping. What you see is that I've got dollars. If you count something by dollars, it's a parameter. Right off the bat, my sources and targets have been parameterized. So I can deal with any source and any target file. It will dynamically adjust based off of the fields in both the source and target. In to the expression, what we see is I parameterize even the expression itself. We're going to focus here. We can get into the syntax some other day. But basically, I'm checking to see if it is a date, the from format. Go ahead and convert it to the to format. So by field, it's dynamically checking if yes, can do the to date from the from to the to. All right, now how is relevant to Informatica Cloud? All right, so back and show Informatica Cloud. So here, I've got something called my custom integration service. And I've already got my date conversion, but I'll create another one just so you can see what you do from scratch. So date conv. So Eddie in the organization can now leverage a date conversion utility. They just have to have access to Informatica Cloud. What we would do is they imported this, so that's just one step for the sake of time that I've skipped. But I imported that template into Informatica Cloud. So use, and you see a screenshot, so you can see what it looks like. And then the user can simply go off and specify any source connection that they have access to. any file, any object. So here I'm going to choose my order file. I want to write that to a file that has the converted format. So I'm just simply created a order date converted. The thing that I'm prompted for in my step 4 is the from and the to format. These are not exposed to something like a mapping. The end user is simply exposed to pick source, pick it, choose to, and then you're off and running. Right, so it's easy that you can publish out on the intranet, anywhere internally, just go off from Informatica Cloud, they get this, and you've done something in a very consistent way that spreads beyond just the PowerCenter community. Right, that's simple. Let me do another quick example here around something that I created for a partner. This is called the Ulti Employee Extract. So Ulti is an HR application that it's a cloud-based application. One of their users want to be able to get access to the employee object. Now, give me an easy way to get access to the employee object from this application. Now, you could just go off and say, oh, everybody, free access, go crazy, here's the object. But be able to provide some level of consistent ways of pulling the data with some level of control is very important, right? So, yeah, it would give people access to the ultimate object, but provide some level of data formatting and lookups. Maybe there's a bunch of code values that the user's not going to know what those are. They want to be able to see the descriptions of these codes. So the formats and lookups can be completely hidden from the end user. They need to be exposed to these. These can be standard transformations that are published and apply for every customer. But we still want to provide some level of control and self-service. So maybe each customer can specify their own filter, right? Maybe they're only concerned employees from a specific department, or employees created this year, or something along those lines. We want to provide a mechanism for each user to be able to choose their own fields that they want. They don't want a standard dump of all 200 fields. They may only want to have a handful of fields, and they want to write it directly into their target. Right? So here, go through the wizard steps for this template. Here in step 2, my source has been fixed to the contact object. So that's something that is just part of the template. Customers can't change it. They only see the contact object. It, however, is something that can be changed from customer to customer. So again, the customers can go off and choose their own targets, and it's up to the customer to see what they want to go off and to. Next step is actually going to be in step 4, right? So in the date version example, I just had the to and the from format. Before, what I'm exposing is the filter can be simply chosen each customer, or each customer can specify their own mapping. So they have access to all the fields and simply drag and drop the fields they want, put it into the location that they want, and they still have access to those same expression transformations that I did before. This example provides a unified way with standard transformation that applies for every customer for getting a common object like employee. This is something that can also apply to people that give read access to the data warehouse. A base username and password that has read access, if you provide a mechanism like this, you can perform some upfront transformations so that it is going to come out consistently in the way we want to expose it to the end user, and still have some level of self-service control on how they want to integrate that data with other data sources downstream, like a staging area or an ODS.
Hey, Ron, that's probably a good segue into administration and how you can control access rights and permissions.
Yes. So the next 2 pieces that I'm going to talk about here are those. So it's going to be talking about something that we call fine-grained access control, base security control over the different objects in Informatica Cloud, and this notion of a master and a suborg within Informatica Cloud to build out more of a ICC or COE. Let's talk about fine-grained access control. So here we go, and back into Informatica Cloud. In administration, we see that we have this area for user groups. For example that we see out there, there are developers, there are people that are in ops. Developers, they connect to sandbox systems, they build everything. We actually don't have access and can run what needs to be done in production. Only the people in operations will have that ability. Now, with the notion of user groups, if I take a look at the developer user group that I created, see very specific levels of control over specific objects. Global objects like secure agents, schedules, those are only available to the operations team to manage and build and modify, but the developers have read access to those. They have read, write, and execute access on the actual jobs, the data sync service, the PowerCenter jobs that I showed you. They have the ability to build those. Right. On the flip side, the operations team, they have the ability to create the global objects, but they can read and execute the that have been created by the ops team, by the developers. They can modify it. They can only read and run. All right, level of control, and that can be done globally. Now, what you'll see if you go into any of the objects inside of Informatica Cloud, there's a little lock icon. It allows you to override some of those permissions at an individual object layer. Since the production Salesforce connection, I go in and say, you know, I don't want there to be any confusion, anybody messing with the data. Developers actually don't have read access to this. So this property, developer logs in drop-down when you're choosing your sources and targets, they even see the Salesforce connection as an option. And additionally, you go off and say, you know, there's some data synchronization tasks that we've built, and we've actually gone off and trained the operations folks on this job. So if there actually is a problem, we should be able to modify this task because I'm okay that they've been trained. So you go off and say, operations can now update and delete this task they wanted to do. It's global control and individual customization at an object layer on all these objects. One level of providing administration and control over Informatica Cloud. Second way is through this notion of a master and a sub-org. And to see that, I switched to this, something that we call our admin console. So the admin console allows me with a single login to see the activities across different Informatica Cloud accounts. And that you have your account that administrator that you're using, but there could be project 1, project 2, and so forth that you're managing. Right? So to create additional what we call sub-orgs, if you see the administration tab, sub-orgs, you can just go off and create orgs at license to be able to do that. And then they simply just appear as projects. And switch the context to, say, project 1. Every is going to have a different set of connections, set of users, different that they're going to have that's out there. And so we can simply go in and switch the context to see what's going on across these different orgs. And that can not only at the list of objects that are there, but if you're doing and looking at the activity logs, you can see project 1, they ran into a few errors, they got a warning, and everything looks fine. So it looks like they were able to figure out what's going on. And at project 2, it doesn't look like they've done anything, but if I go on and switch to the audit log, okay, it looks like they got started. Somebody just logged in, but they haven't done anything yet.
This is really powerful. Some of the sort of longest serving Informatica customers are starting to take advantage of this type of rollout, and this is that concept of governed self-service. Any other best practices or kind of insights to share on this type of deployment?
Yeah, I think first of all, this can't be understated. the Audit Log is available from a centralized place. And certainly when you're doing anything in the cloud, we automatically just end up logging everything. So from a single web interface, you can see this very easily. And it's these kind of capabilities, the reason why we're seeing some of our largest Informatica customers extending the relationship with Informatica with large deployments of Informatica Cloud. Because what we're seeing is that from the CIO standpoint, by a common set of tools and technologies that can be centrally administered, the big fears around cloud is these data silos are going to start popping up again. And what you want to do is have data silos around integration. Right? Somebody's using some open source tool over here, somebody's using a free utility from a cloud app over here, and there's no consistent way of performing integration. Again, you lose just consistency of your data. So back to those best practices that many of you are doing around the Integration Competency Center and the Center of Excellence now can fully apply to Informatica Cloud, both from an administration standpoint and from a sharing standpoint, as I showed you with the templates and with the PowerCenter interoperability.
Great. I think, I mean, a lot of questions still coming in, but I think we need to kind of move to a conclusion and wrap up, and then we want to encourage some next steps here. Thanks, Ron, for a really good, detailed overview. Let's jump up with a summary. So we took you through these 5 key areas. In fact, let me just bring you back in for a question, Ron, on the administration side. A couple of questions came in around using third-party scheduling tools. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, the answer is definitely yes, and that's one part I didn't get to talk about much. There is a public REST API that surrounds Informatica Cloud to be able to do things like schedule, execute tasks, monitor tasks. So that's all available through a REST API. Yes, absolutely no problem. Of other things too, but that's the answer is yes to that question.
Well, let me ask you another one around data volumes. What's the max data volume Informatica Cloud can handle?
Good news about that, there is none, and it's because we use that same PowerCenter engine. So all the benefits you get around scale and performance all apply to Informatica Cloud because we're using the same exact engine.
You can go and look at, just type into your browser trust.informaticacloud.com, and you can see the status tab, and you'll see kinds of a number of jobs and volume of records we're moving through the service on a daily basis. This is an overview. I also want to let you know, just at a high level, we really broadened out our suite of cloud capabilities. We started out with integration, and that's really what we've been focusing on today. We've extended that with some pretty powerful data quality and master data management, and specifically we have some master data management capabilities in the cloud for Salesforce.com customers. Some really interesting use cases that we've seen around making sure you get a single view of your customer and have really an ability to consolidate data from multiple orgs or instances of Salesforce. So if you're interested in better data quality and greater adoption of Salesforce, we definitely want to talk to you about our new master data management capabilities in the cloud. We've also recently introduced some data masking options, which are rolling out over the next few months. So the ability to mask data for your test environments, really plugging up some of the potential holes there of moving cloud-based data into a test environment and making sure that your developers aren't working with very sensitive information. Recently, we've extended into business process automation, and we're going to be introducing a number of new capabilities, initially for Salesforce.com customers again, but you're going to see all of these expand into other areas over the course of this year and next. So a lot continuing in the cloud, but as you've heard here, a key focus is to make sure that we can give you a single platform that allows you to really build once and run anywhere. So you can build mappings and maplets, share them in the cloud, build with PowerCenter, or you can build them in the cloud and bring them back into your PowerCenter developer environment and do more advanced kinds of transformations and connections and so forth within PowerCenter. So we have a white paper on our website if you're interested, which goes through the 5 ways that Ron walked us through today, and we'll share this presentation. But one last thing I wanted to encourage you all to do, if you haven't already, and I know there are some existing current cloud customers on today's webinar. But do take a minute to go out to informaticacloud.com. You can get started with a trial, download the agent, and start actually doing some things very quickly. I also want to stress you don't necessarily need PowerCenter to run Informatica Cloud. Secure Agent does give you the same runtime engine, but where we're seeing a lot of adoption is with our longest established customers, as we've went through today, as we've gone through, extending what they're doing with PowerCenter by delivering that agility and controlled self-service out to different groups, and rein in some of these SaaS applications and make sure they're getting under adoption out of all of their cloud investments. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we do a whole separate cloud track at Informatica World this year. Some of our customers speaking, product managers will be there for hands-on labs. So do plan to attend if you are able to, and you'll get to ask your questions directly to Ron. Any final thoughts on where we're going with Informatica Cloud and some of the innovation you're seeing?
There's still a lot of cool stuff that we didn't have time to talk about today. So definitely, if you can, Informatica World is going to be a great place to go. Again, as Darren said, we'll be there, not just myself. There'll be folks on the engineering team. We'll be more than happy to share a lot of things that are coming up, and just brainstorm around things that you'd like to see as well. So Informatica World, it's going to be a good event this year.
Okay, great. And someone's asking questions about specifics on security and the agent. So we do have a support line. You can actually click within the service. You can click support if you're having any challenges. You can also use the community site, which is a link from the Informatica Cloud website. Active site where you can participate, and communicate directly with product managers. Our user interface expert is our most active commenter on the community. So you can get back directly around the user experience, and you do that. So I'd like to thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in the community and seeing you at Informatica World. Thank you.
Today's web conference, you may now disconnect.